But before we go, Rob has a short story on Substack called Living Under Controlled Abundance. And I have finished it. I finished it earlier this week, and I had no idea what it was going in, but I'm really glad that I read it. Um, the way it's broken down, everything is just very well written. I mean, a perfect before Rob, before we go into the meaning and why you wrote it, I want to give you praise for this because not a lot of authors do this anymore. Most authors have a tendency of just going over dialogue with very minor setups or details, and you've struck a perfect balance of dialogue as well as setting up the scene between the characters. You know, you get a good visual of what the characters are. And that's difficult with short stories as well. You know, it usually takes a few chapters to kind of build up a connection with the characters, but off the bat, just after a few paragraphs, you can identify with them, or at least understand them, and you have a good idea of who they are. So Rob, please walk us through what was living under controlled abundance.
Well, it was an evolving project. I tend to, as I'm working, my main focuses tend to be on more heady academic-y intellectual stuff. And then there seems to come a point where, well, my brain ripens into delightful cheese, what you might say. But my brain is just sort of saturated with that and needs another outlet. And I've really always enjoyed writing creatively and writing short stories, had somewhat of a knack for it. Um, I wrote a short story at one point that was for class and saved on my home computer, and my brother found it like I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, and it scared the crap out of him. He thought I had gone insane or something because he was like, didn't know the context. So it's been something I've enjoyed, and I often forget how much I enjoy it, and then I come back to it. So it takes me a while to get to another fiction work, usually several years between them. So this one came out of just being saturated in sort of the intellectual side of things and really out of my other project, Defund the Fun Police, which I've tried to not make overly academic, but it is a approach through reason and intellect on some level, and at least requires a lot of setup on that realm. So I was sort of in the realm of fighting with the ideas of equity and the DEI stuff and the takeover of modern corporations and systems and societies and that sort of stuff. And then I had an idea for a single short story, which ended up being the first chapter in the book. But I had the one idea and thought it was morbid, but also good. And so I started working on that. And then another one popped up. And then I was like, oh, I could connect these. And so it ended up being a short series of short stories and all falling together rather nicely in the end. Um, and I'm hoping that it'll, scratch the other itch and be a little bit more accessible than dry argumentation for some people.
Yeah, you start off that speaking of engagement, it hooked me. It hooked me very early on, right at the beginning. You start off and you break out each story with like a set of rules of what the controlled abundance guidelines are, the parameters of living within this. And I believe that term would be an oxymoron. You have controlled and then you have abundance. So you think of controlled as being finite, and then you think of abundant as being infinite, and but they don't actually balance out. They're polar opposites, but you combine them together, you get controlled abundance. And it's just it's a complete uh set of mental gymnastics that we go through
Hmm.
here in this story.
Yeah,
Um,
so I you know, when I set out to write, I don't know why it didn't occur to me at first, but it didn't totally occur to me until the very end of the book. And I sent you the basically the manuscript copy, so that's on a Word document and gets to have, a few things that Substack doesn't have, like different fonts. And I put the chapter titles in sort of a horror type of font, and then it's like, oh, this is actually kind of a horror story, maybe more than kind of. But I don't think of myself as you know, writing horror stories in any sense of the word. But then I think, oh, this is kind of horrifying at the end, well, throughout it, but as it goes. So, I mean, I hope it's not strictly a horror story, but it kind of has that element to it. Um, so it was a fun project.
yeah, I could tell you had fun with it, and I think it would be considered horror simply because we're looking at a very possible future. Uh,
Yes, yeah.
it's so
So
it's so bizarre to us now looking at it because it's not here yet. I mean, there's rumbling, there's rumors, and I'll let you expand on that in a second here. But there's that almost disconnect because you're listening or you're reading about people in the story that have normalized this stuff, and it's borderline on the horizon now, and it's just eerie. And I think that's where a lot of the horror comes in. It's because they're rationalizing a lot of these absolutely crazy socialist bonkers agendas, and we're like, wait a minute, that's actually, that's a real possibility here. Could you go into that a little bit?
Well, so I call the tagline that I came up with it. My sales pitch is, this is 1984 for the TikTok generation.
That's
So
exact. Yeah.
1984 is a short book in itself. Mine is shorter and it's composed of short stories, kind of like reels. So I really, uh, I like the punchiness. I like the shortness, but I think it also fits the time. Unfortunately, people aren't uh, much readers anymore, so I'm hoping to that plays in my favor of having that sort of quick iteration. And now I'm releasing it on Substack a chapter at a time, so sort of bite-size pieces. I tend to release big, long things all at once, and that has met with little success. So try something new and try to write the little 4-minute read kind of things that hopefully will gather some more initial attraction, and then that'll get people who would be more serious interested in it. So yeah, in 1984 for the TikTok generation, it's a world not too far away, and that's unfortunate.
It is.
But mhm.
It's a real possibility, though. You talk about, I mean, without giving away any of the plot, just some of the themes you talk about, uh, a very robust social credit score system, uh,
Yeah.
and that plays into the characters and kind of some of the decisions they make, and even normalizing what would be considered degenerate and belligerent and sinful activities for the greater good of the population, to increase their social credit score. You talk about the effects of uh, climate change and how that
Mhm.
affects people's everyday lives and I guess mental well-being. If people get afraid or scared because they see a little exhaust fume or they see something going on, how does that eat away at people, or people that have bought into it to the point to where they're trying to contain cow farts for the environment. um on top of that, you also talk about, uh I would say, nihilism as well, and meaninglessness. There's definitely a character or a few characters in this story that have completely given up hope. You talk about, and what are some of the things that they've gone through and are going through, that have gotten them to that position, and then how are they dealing with it once in that position? Another issue or another subject that you bring up as well is gender identity. And it kind of threw me for a loop because there's a character in there that is that goes by they. And reading that, it took me a second to always understand that you're referring to this specific character. And I think that there's another character in there as well that you referred to as it. And so I'm reading this, and it's just it. That's what I mean when I said mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. So it is. There is an aspect of that horror, uh, but again, it's just the format's incredible.
Mm.
So I highly recommend it if you've got a couple of hours over the weekend, or you're trying to kill some time, or not. I mean, if you just want to engage in a good story, that's it. And it's hey, it's made for the TikTok generation, so it takes a couple hours, and it sucks you right in.